Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Sam and Cole podcast, presented by Black Creek Outfitters. Stop by there and see anybody in the Butler family, and we appreciate their support. By the way, Joe, if you happen to listen to this, hopefully you got my email the other day with the massive numbers, and we thank all of you who listen to the podcast for the numbers of people who are listening. And I got to tell you, Cole, you sent me that number, and I was very, very surprised and certainly pleased that a lot of people are enjoying what we're doing, because I know we're enjoying it, and certainly there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
And hopefully those of you who are listening, mention it to Joe or John or any of the Butler family over there that, hey, you listen to the podcast. And Joe's been very supportive of a lot of things that I've done over the last 10 years, and I really appreciate it. And they've got a great store. And, they had one of those big box stores come to town, and and become competition, which literally about an 8-iron away from their front door.
Yeah.
And, well, for you, Colby, about wedge. But
no, not right now. Not during football season.
But you're like me, huh?
It's a 5-iron, and then it's a 3-iron to get it back straight. That's the.
Here's my handicap, and if you want my money, now's the time to take it.
Yeah, that's right.
But they had that big box store open, and it. It just goes to show you that local businesses like Black Creek Outfitters, who do a good job, who cater to the local customers, who understand the local market, are really doing a service for the community. And of course, Joe has been very involved with the St. John's River Keeper and with a lot of green projects there. Really has gotten into a lot of stand-up paddleboarding things, stand-up paddleboarding, yoga on your stand-up paddleboard.
What?
Yeah, oh yeah, all that. And the other thing, and we'll get off this real quick, but if you want to go kayaking, you can go into Black Creek, and they have the names of all the places, whether it's Kayak Amelia or if you want to do it in St. Johns County or somewhere else, and they'll put you on to the guide immediately, and they'll even make the calls for you. So stop into Black Creek for any of those outdoor needs, and you can even buy the big green egg as well.
Now you're talking.
There we go. Cole, of course, the Jaguars play against Detroit tomorrow night. As we tape this on Thursday night. It's the third preseason game, and everybody you talk to this week, including Gus Bradley, says, it's the closest thing you get to real game situation. But it's not yet the regular season. The interesting thing is the Jaguars did treat it like a regular game week. They had install, they had preparation, they practiced that way, they had a service team, which is what they call the scout team. So it'll be interesting to see how they perform, because they game planned, and they're going to go up against Ndamukong Suh, and if he plays, Nick Fairley, and Rasheem Mathis, and Matthew Stafford, and Calvin Johnson, and perhaps Reggie Bush, and Eric Ebron, a first-round draft pick. So a pretty good test for this third week.
It is, and usually the third week is the one, as you mentioned, that has they game plan for it more, they go at it a little bit more, but there is another layer of interest in this, and because of the Blake Bortles situation that he's going to play with the first team, I think this is I don't know if it's the most anticipated preseason game that I can recall, but it's one that it could potentially be one of the most important preseason games, since the third preseason game of 2007, when Byron Leftwich couldn't move anybody down the field. I think that was against Green Bay, if I recall right. And basically, David Garrard became the starter as a result of that.
Well, it is. I don't think that there's a quarterback competition right now. I do think that they have a lot of faith in Chad Henne, and they think that he's going to perform well. And I even think that if he doesn't perform overwhelmingly well in this game, and Blake Bortles does, that Henne is still going to be the starter. Now, I'm not going to say that's going to happen as the season progresses, but I do think that Henne will take those first snaps in game one coming up.
I agree with you, but don't you think Bortles' performance in this game with the ones against the ones could change the roadmap of the season from a, well, let's wait and see till we're mathematically out of it before we put him in, to a, well, let's figure out the best time to get him in there as early as we can? I mean, that could really change the way things flow. Certainly part of it's going to be analyzing and deciding how much improvement does Bortles need until he's ready to go. Part of it, though, is all, and again, we're going on this as if we just expected he's going to perform well. And if he does perform well, that's going to change the entire tenor of the conversation when the season starts. I am convinced that while they may have thought that it was likely that Bortles wouldn't be ready to go with the opener when they drafted him, I think now they're seeing some things that are accelerated faster than they anticipated. And as much as you tip your cap to Gus Bradley for saying we're not going to go put him in just yet, you have to have your eyes open. You have to be able to look and see what Bortles is doing and then adjust accordingly, because at some point, one thing is clear, at some point, Blake Bortles will be the starting quarterback of the Jacksonville Jaguars. The question is when and how does he get there?
A couple things you learn when you travel with the team, which I've had the opportunity to for a couple of weeks. They love the guy. Okay, I mean everything about him. I mean when you travel with him, he's a good guy. He'll engage you in conversation. When you have a professional conversation with him, as I have on several occasions, kind of away from that media press conference situation, he's honest and forthright. Gus Bradley thinks that George O'Leary did a magnificent job with him at UCF. And in that nothing rattles him. O'Leary might have yelled and screamed and whatever he did, but whatever it was, it helped Bortles kind of become this very calm, I can handle it, nothing scares him, nothing rattles him, whether it's a rush or whether it's a blitz or whether it's a defense he hasn't seen, he doesn't fall apart. What this has done, and if he play, let's anticipate that both he and Henny play well tomorrow. What this has done is given the Jaguars an option if Henny starts to play poorly, if things don't go in the direction that they want, win or lose. If Henny is not producing at the quarterback position, and you look at Chad's historical stats, he's a 75 quarterback rating guy. That's where he is his entire career. Now, whether or not that's because he hasn't had the best cast around him, or that's who he is, I mean, he's not 100, but he's not 30 either. He's a 75 guy, and so that means you're capable of winning games and capable of not losing games for your team. So if he plays at that level, then the Jaguars will be fine. If he doesn't perform, like you said, because Bortles has accelerated everybody's thought process about what he might be ready to do, I think it gives them an earlier option way before they start thinking about whether they're eliminated or not.
It's almost as big a story as it is about Bortles, because we don't know when or if he would be out there on the field, is the offensive line.
Right.
And it's not nowhere near as sexy a story because it's not the quarterback and you're not watching it all the time. But, boy, they are potentially a real mess right now. And how that offensive line plays could impact how both Henny and Bortles play against the Lions and how comfortable and confident the coaches are with the offense and the offensive line could impact their decision-making on who they start and when they start the quarterback throughout the course of the year.
They'll have to make a decision, obviously, at center in the next couple of weeks. They want Brewster to win that job, and they feel like that he has the talent and all of the skills that they want at what they're trying to do in terms of their center occasionally pulls, and he's got a zone block, and he's got a reach block, because Brewster is a very good athlete, quick, smart, does all those things. Now, Jacques McClellan is a much more powerful guy, but the Jaguars aren't going to just, put a fullback in the game and put a tailback in the game and run it up the gut. They're going to run a zone. They're not going to run a 1 or a 3 or a 2. They're going to run a zone. They're going to hand it to the guy and say, they're going to zone block in front of you, pick the hole and go. But the way to defend that, obviously, is to put a nose tackle at an angle on the center and wreak havoc in the middle of the line. Now, Brewster has got to be able to handle that. And as Gus likes to say, he wants his players to clean it up. You can't have 6 good plays and then a bad one, and then 5 good plays and then 1 average. You got to clean those up to where you're having 12 good plays in a row. And that's where Brewster has fallen down in these first 3 weeks of camp. Boy, he'll play great for 6 plays and then 1 where he looks like he's lost, or 5 plays and then he'll snap the ball over Henny's head.
Yeah, and I haven't seen him look lost, Sam. I've seen him the snaps, obviously, and I've seen him get overpowered. And that's the bigger concern to me because he's not going to suddenly get more powerful between week 1 and week 6.
No, I agree. But in talking to Jed Fish and in talking to Gus Bradley, I don't think that they're going to ask their center to be that road grader kind of guy. I think they're going to they're asking their center to move more and be a little bit more athletic than just a powerful guy. Now, having said that, they think McClendon is incredibly powerful and could easily win that job. In fact, if he plays really well tomorrow night, he's going to be the starting center in week 1.
All right, so if I had to pin you down and we're spending your money on this,
right?
Placing the bet, who's the center, right guard, right tackle when the season begins?
Right. Cameron Bradfield will be at right tackle. Brandon Lindner will be at right guard, and Jacques McClendon will be at center. And Lindner at right guard because he is one of those guys that they see this incredible upside to, and they feel like, okay, let's just go with this guy because he's going to grow at it, and it may be faster than we think, it may be slower than we think, but I think that's where we're going. Matt is writing me a note. Let's see what Matt. Matt is passing notes in class. I did that a few times in I want to say the 5th grade, and then I tried it once in the 7th grade, and it got me.
Was it a check yes or no note, or was it something?
Yeah, no. Now this is a very good point. One of the reasons that they like Lindner so much, and Chad Henne told me this tonight, is because he played in Jed Fish's offense.
Knows the offense. Yeah.
He knows the whole thing. Same thing, by the way, with Alan Hearns.
With Hearns and with Stephen Morris. And
in fact, Henne even said tonight, Henne said, I can use hand signals, obviously, with Cecil Shorts because we played together. He said, but when Hearns is out there, I can use hand signals because he's run them for his whole college career, too.
Yeah, there's a real benefit to getting up and running in a hurry with that. One thing I will point out, too, as far as the offensive line, they're going to get a good test in the middle of that line with Sue in there, right? I mean, this is not so this will be a good thing to keep an eye on and see how it goes. Tom Coughlin once said to me that unlike other positions that tend to improve as time goes on and then take a big jump and then they kind of flatten out, then they take a big jump, where it's offensive linemen have a slow, steady, gradual improvement, and it's based on more playing time and getting stronger and understanding the intricacies and learning the guy next to you and everything else. So if you think Linder's your guy and you have nobody else who's clearly better than him on the offensive line, you should play him.
Put him in there, yeah. And they love how competitive he is. They love that he's relentless. And you see, and what they'd really, if Luke Bowanko was just a little bit better, he'd also be the starter.
Well, or healthier too, right?
Well, and of course they'll wait till game time on Friday night to see whether he's cleared. But if he was just a little bit better player, a little more polished, then he would be the starting center because he would grow in that position as well. Because they don't know what they have there yet, and that's what they keep saying. We're not sure what we have there, and it may be that this is our guy, but we haven't had enough time with him to figure it out.
The other thing I'll be looking forward to in Friday night's game is I'm going to see how how Rasheed Mathis is doing.
Yep.
Always one of my favorite guys.
I was going over my flip card. I looked at it. It said Rasheed Mathis, and then next to it, of course, it said BCC, and then next to it said 12.
12 years.
Like, holy smokes!
Yeah.
I mean, of course, Rasheed is just a great guy. Hosted the End Zone for 6 or 7 years. Really, I mean, it sounds really silly. Feels like a son to me. He really does. And he is just such a good guy. And I just could not believe he'd been in the league for 12 years.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, he's got to alter his game as a starting cornerback in the league because I don't care how good you are. You're a different player when you're 33 than when you were 21.
No doubt.
And
he's got to play as much with his head as with his feet.
Right.
He wants to just outrun things before.
Yeah. I was looking at their roster. Don Carey's on this roster. C.J. Mosley, in fact, is now a starter. Montel Owens is still on this roster as still listed as kind of a fullback special teams
The Shaq Harris
kind of guy. Yeah, well, it could be a little bit, but they've got guys. It's funny because the interesting thing about the guys on the Lions, at least when you start talking about Mosley and Mathis and Montel, those are all guys who would fit in on a Gus Bradley coach team.
Yes.
And there's a lot of guys, and I had this discussion with Bradley tonight. Yeah, he was talking. Really, I just think he's fantastic, and he is espousing the competitive and the motivational philosophy that I've had for years and years and years, and he he's brought it to life for a lot of people. That you really don't compete with anybody. You compete basically against kind of a standard of excellence that exists, and you just try to go out there and be your best. And that is the single thread that runs through all great achievers that I've ever met, is that they're not competing against the guy across the street or the guy across the river or the guy in the next city. They're competing against, and not even against themselves. They want to see how good they can be. And that's when you start working with Gus Bradley in this team, that's what you see. And that's what he loves about guys like Lindner, like about Bowanko, that they're that kind of player. Luke Jokel doesn't care if they traded for a left tackle this week. He's like, whatever. Yeah. I'm interested in trying to be as good as I can be. Period. And I'm
by the way, Luke Jokel, who also is as low key. I mean, I don't know if the guy's heart rate ever gets over like 75.
Right.
He's just,
that's true.
Hey, we do want to talk about one other thing. Of course, 7:30 Friday night kickoff, 7 o'clock for pregame on Channel 4 if you're waiting for that one. And you and Tony Baselli and Nikki Kimbleton will be on the sidelines. So
right.
Have the broadcast. Did want to point out today, as we tape this again on Thursday, the first ever Jacksonville Sports Council luncheon here in Jacksonville at the Hyatt. Kirk Herbstreit was the guest speaker.
Yeah, that's a shame, but I'm sure the lunch was good.
You know what? It was a jam-packed room. There were over 800 people in the Hyatt.
And people should support that.
Yeah.
But I mean, Kirk Herbstreit couldn't say anything I'd be interested in unless he said I'm going to run for president.
Well, you may not be the target audience here.
Maybe that's true.
But from an event standpoint, they did a great job with the event. But they also, I mean, it really showcased what they're trying to do with the Jack Sports Council, I think, which is trying to be sort of the centerpiece, the center point for this, the sports conversation in Jacksonville. Honestly, I don't know if you can have one center point for that. I think you have a lot of different interests, but it could be interesting to see if that does. How
they can bring in next? That Desmond Howard, can bring him in next?
Well, I think the next one they're going to do is going to be around March Madness.
I could care less what Desmond Howard had to say when he was in the locker room. Oh, that's right. He didn't have anything to say, did he? I forgot.
I wasn't here when he was here, so I don't.
You weren't? He wouldn't talk.
Is that right?
Yeah, he's one of those guys that just wouldn't talk. Now him and that Sterling Sharp, both of them, wouldn't talk to the media, and then now that they're getting paid, now they are the media.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I've only had one interaction with Desmond, and it was at the Super Bowl in Miami when the Colts and Saints played. Uh-huh. And we were on Radio Row, and I saw him down there, went over and said hi, put my hand out, he shook me. I said, hey, I'm from Jackson. Oh, yeah, okay. He couldn't have been nicer. Came on, talked to us on the show for a while. Couldn't, very, engaging, nice guy.
Working. He's trying to stay employed.
And maybe that's it, or, maybe he just didn't like you, Sam. I mean, that's possible.
Well,
right?
As I tease Mark Brunell all the time, and I tell him all the time, if you knew that you'd be sitting next to me in the booth 20 years later, you'd have been a lot nicer to me as a player, wouldn't you? Mark goes, oh, yeah.
Yeah. It is something. And one other thing I want to finish with is I spoke to the West Side Rotary earlier.
Great group.
Unbelievable.
Was WWGA was there, right?
And sitting next to him, Andrew Crenshaw.
Andrew was there. Yeah.
Andrew Crenshaw.
I called Andrew the other day, and I said, I left him a message, and I just said, Andrew, call me if I can do anything for you besides just vote for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
He may be calling with a request.
Yeah,
it was great group, and I this is, I don't know, 6th or 7th year in a row I've spoken to him, and one really interesting question came toward the end, and somebody said, what advice would you give Tim Tebow about being a broadcaster? And I'll tell you what I said. I'm curious to hear what you said. I said I think I would give him the same kind of advice I would give him in terms of being an NFL quarterback. I would work on your delivery. And part of that, and that was a funny line, right? But the other part was decide if and this sort of speaks to the last point you're making, which is Tim. I think Tim and anybody else who's a former player who goes into the broadcasting business has to decide that they're a broadcaster who used to play football rather than a football player who's doing some broadcasting.
Right, and that's right, because and Tebow thinks that he's a potential still player. Still
Right.
thinks that he will potentially play. So, the most gratifying thing is, and while this certainly isn't brain surgery, that almost everybody who gets into this business from the sports side of it eventually says to you, boy, it's harder than I thought, and two, well, you guys work a lot more hours than I thought you did.
I can second that.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I was a roofer for a year. I know how hard those guys work. All right, so this isn't roofing, and
That's hard work.
I'm not laying bricks, And I try to, if I'm there when those guys are picking up the trash, I try to go out and say hi to them and give them some Gatorade or whatever, because I know how hard those guys are working. But I was talking to Paul Puzzlesny tonight, and he looked at me and he goes, "So how is that job?" I said, "Mine?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Come on, I've flown with the Blue Angels and I had beers with Arnold Palmer. What other job lets you do that?"
Not too many, that's for sure. All right,
exactly
that'll do it for the Sam and Cole podcast. Sam will be on the call Friday night for the Jaguars against the Lions. And as always, we are presented by Black Creek Outfitters. Stop by there near the town center for everything that you need to be outdoors with, or in, or on. If you have it there at Black Creek Outfitters. Follow Sam on Twitter at Sam Kavaris. Follow me on Twitter at Cole Pepper. And we'll join you next time looking back on Blake Bortles and the Jaguars' performance against the Lions when we join you on the Sam and Cole podcast.